feeling more in the dark.
Oh, yeah. I think it should be
If
okay.
you need anything that is,
No.
I don't know, that would be helpful.
No,
Can I check?
Oh, yeah.
You won't use it or you will? Yeah, it works.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And I think we can start.
Okay, great.
Again, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our restoration seminar. I'm glad that we just keep our numbers steady and people are also interested in, from the public and from the tech community, not just our students from tech for a restoration certificate. That makes me really happy, and I'm really glad to have Bradford in our restoration seminar today, and we will actually see their work, and probably he will tell us about it because they have a project just south of here, which I'm really looking forward how it will develop. That was basically the time when I met Bradford at the meetings for the BNRC small projects, and I was amazed of their idea. But I don't want to talk more about it. I will just introduce him real shortly. Bradford Watson received a Bachelor of Architecture from the Pennsylvania State University and a postdoc professional master's from Cranbrook Academy of Art. He is a licensed architect who spent 12 years in professional practice with an emphasis on culture and performing arts, design, and planning, prior to joining the Montana State University. He has undertaken extensive research on the displaced terrain of Butte, Montana, resulting from its history of extraction, resulting a new landscape that can be reconsidered as topography of possible occupation and intervention through the new reclamation strategies. His research has been presented at the ESCA International Conference and published in MONU. I'm not sure what these acronyms are. Maybe Scenario On-Site Review. He has also been awarded a small project grant through the Butte Natural Resource Damage Council to reclaim the former Bonanza mine dump as a community asset and economic generator through BMX. His current research examines the occupation of the mountain west and the extractive nature of that occupation, both through resource and experiential extraction. This research has been presented at the ESCA, CELA, and DCA conferences and published in Ground Up and On-Site Review. So that was it. Welcome to our restoration seminar and looking forward to your talk.
Great. Thank you, Robert. It's a pleasure for me to be able to present this work. As I was chatting with Olivia a little bit earlier today, a lot of this research has been published in international journals. Some of those, Manu is a Dutch publication, but also presented internationally to both collegiate schools of architecture and landscape architecture. So this is really a great opportunity for me to actually talk about the work here in the community that I'm working and kind of creating my research within. I'm going to start by going through a bit of the kind of premise, some of the earlier work and still ongoing body of research developing specifically around issues of mapping and extraction here in the Butte Hill related to the community of this place. And then the second part, I will talk about the Bonanza project, which is the one Robert mentioned that we've just received some funding for. So I do want to make sure that I make everything, so I will be reading a fair amount of this, so I apologize for that, but I do want to leave some time at the end so we can have kind of conversation about these things. There are special places in this world where the deep subsurface conditions of our planet dance and intermingle with the superficial landscape, geology becoming geography. This is evident in a prosaic way through the massive road cuts allowing interstates and rail lines to travel through otherwise difficult or impossible mountain terrain. It can also be sublime, as the case of Yellowstone National Park, where the geography of the park, the draw for visitors from around the world, shifts on a daily basis as a result of the molten and dynamic geological condition making its way to the surface. These two cases, one responding to geology with a geography of necessity, and the other with a geography of novelty, represent the most typical and commonplace relationships between these two terms. In general, the experience of geology is didactic at best, but most likely completely overlooked. In these two extreme cases, there is no reciprocity between geology and geography. One always wins over the other. The true agency of the geologic-geographic interface can be observed in their more subtle and nuanced occurrences, when we understand them as the content and context of a place, or when geology, the content, and geography, the context, are mutualistic. The place can be understood with evolving continuum. One does not have hierarchy over the other. This mutualistic relationship, not necessarily beautiful in its manifestation, is in constant flux, balancing necessity and desire. Beauty, however, does lie in the eyes of the beholder, as Robert Smithson cites in Herculetus in saying, "The most beautiful world is like a heap of rubble tossed down in confusion." It would appear that value in several forms could be found through the acknowledgement of the geologic reality of a place. One such place where geology, or content, and geography, context, are inextricably linked is Butte. In 1969, Michael Heiser conceived and constructed Displaced Replaced Mass, which we can see here. This piece called for the extraction of 3 large holes in a dry lake bed in Nevada, in which 3 boulders were placed, each weighing the same as the extracted material. This piece created a dialogue of not only the mass of different materials, but also the movement and transformation of that material, a sorting. It also raised the question of where the excavated material went, for there is no displacement without replacement. We move mass every day for many reasons, but an example as geologic and obvious as Heiser's does promote some reflection upon the anthropogeological movement of raw material and the sorting regimes that are enacted through this movement. This piece foreshadows the anthropogeomorphological condition we currently find ourselves in, a byproduct landscape created by industrial sorting regimes. Throughout its history, many maps have been drawn of Butte. There were several, however, that truly document the relationship between geology and geography, thus documenting Butte as a rich and geological informed metropolis. The first of these were a series of mining claims maps from the end of the 19th century. These maps establish an introductory framework to understand the integrated relationship between content and context of the Butte Hill in the late 1800s. These maps prioritize the geological condition above all else, but begin to evidence an understanding of an habitation that was growing exponentially to support mining operations. While the first, dated from 1885, is primarily an overlay of the territory, which we can see on the left, a detail from a second map created in 1893 shows much more superficial detail in the developing urban condition as we begin to see street organization and buildings. Unfortunately, like an X-ray, the map only peers through layers, expressing the planimetric relationship while excluding the sectional one. It charts what is above and below, but never the physical and spatial relationship of the two. While hinting at the relationship between content and context in horizontal space, the claims maps fail to capture their mutualistic intertwining. A collection of maps drawn in 1895 by U.S. cartographer R.H. Chapman, long before the digging of the giant Berkeley Pit, tells a more developed story of a highly integrated relationship between human geography and geology, one that perhaps sheds light onto a future way of occupation that tethers the landscape we know and view with the unseen geology beneath in a productive way. Unlike the claims map, Chapman clearly articulates the physical location of elements such as mine shafts and mine waste dumps, the unfortunate yet necessary residue of the subsurface operations as they punctuate the urban form. This collection of map integrates the complexity of influences that shape Butte both geologically and geographically. They evidence the economic values of land based on proximity to veins of resources and their development of processing adjacent to water and rail transport. Chapman's maps are arguably some of the most illuminating chartings of the systemized mess that was Butte. They provide us with a cartographic narrative that cuts to the heart of what made Butte such an amazing city. It was the Butte to remember, confused, tenuous, and contradictory. Mapping, by its nature, records what is of value to the maker. The innocent map does not exist. In addition to indexing the valuable, the process of mapping also projects value, as it provides an understanding of what is mapped. Thus, the map contains a projective agency for geographically specific places. Unlike the historic recordings of the Butte Hill, this new collection of mappings shown here, having a specific focus on the condition of this displaced, replaced landscape, produce a new understanding of place. This new understanding generates an alternative dialogue of value to move beyond the myopic documentation of extraction. These maps aim to create a new discourse around possible futures of this place. Futures that are possible because of a new understanding of the given condition. A condition that is no longer an unknown byproduct of industrialized sorting, but one that is a newly understood topography of occupation. And so this collection of 4 maps that I want to show you here take from a lot of the claims maps, which you've seen, some of the Chapman maps, which is our earliest topographic mapping, and present-day GIS data, both historic and present-day photography, and begin to look at the implications to this kind of mass sorting of the Butte Hill. On the left here, we see the aerial photography working up from West Elementary School here all the way up through the Missoula Gulch. Looking at it, we see a series of sections, and they're a little bit small in here, but the black line representing the pre-mining condition, the red line representing the present-day condition. And so we begin to see in scale here, as an enlarged section, is the volume of displaced and replaced mass that has happened across the Butte Hill. And this relationship to a culture that is now living in some cases 50 feet, 75 feet above that native soil condition, and yet is only possible because of the mining history that's here. It's important to note that I think in these mappings, this is not a claim on one side or the other, but really looking to reveal the opportunities that are very unique to a culture that's created and embedded in a place associated with this kind of massive mining extraction. Or here we see along, again, looking at the Chapman map and the overlay of veining and material, and also the present day condition. And this overlay of what are the mine shaft depths, we start to see at the original and the Steward, but also that culture and the relationship that happens on the surface and is only possible because of what we see in the overlay in the center here, which is one of the sill levels documented in the kind of the stope books. And so what these mappings are trying to do is pull from the single source, single occupant kind of desire that this is, in fact, this map is about this agenda, and starting to look at how we can blend those together as a possibility of opening up a new future, that it's not simply prioritization of the people on the surface or prioritization of the mining resources, but mutualistically, how can we achieve more by working together? Or here we see over at the washout, kind of over on the northeast side of Uptown, a much smaller mine shaft, but we begin to see in the original plat how the organization of the Butte Hill, in terms of a rather orthogonal condition, has been distorted by this shift in the topography. And what is really interesting for me about this work is that all of this occurred simply because of the efficiency of material. And as a designer, to actively engage in this process and to think about what kind of community could exist, what kind of topography could exist, what kind of placemaking could exist if the sorting of this mass amount of waste rock was done to create new place, not simply done for the efficiency of getting rid of waste. So that change from what is a waste left in place to a waste as a resource to do something new. And here we see probably one of the more evident examples of this extraction in the Butte Hill, and looking at what was the top of the now Berkeley pit at an elevation of 6150 in the early 1900s to a current elevation of 4,320 at the bottom of that pit. And that again, the black line representing the topography from the Chapman map, the red line representing what is the current topography, though probably a little bit out of date given the continued working of the continental pit and the rise of the high wall for the tailings pond. But we begin to see that this kind of placemaking is significant, right? The transforming of a hill into a pit and a valley into a lake, right? That those were all done with the prioritization of extraction and solely for the purposes of that resource, not for the beneficial placemaking of a community that was once so embedded in this kind of mass extraction. In his keynote address to the Vernacular Architecture Forum Symposium in 2010, Edwin Dobbs describes his childhood growing up in Butte. We found the place to be endlessly rich and stimulating, 1,000 times more interesting than the fakery of a Disneyland. Another playground when I visited my older cousins on the hill was the Steward Mine. We played there while the mine operated. It helped to be lucky. It also helped to be able to run fast and scale fences quickly. In The Battle for Butte, Michael Malone states that it was geology, not geography, that made this isolated valley such a remarkable place. The scale of resources available within the 25 square mile area of the Butte mining district have yet to be exceeded and still allows Butte to be called the richest hill on earth. It is this richness and depth of resources that contributed to the complex network of shaft mines extending over a mile deep to reach the ore. Approximately 49 miles of vertical mine shaft and 10,000 miles of horizontal mine workings exist under the Butte Hill today. In 1900, there were approximately 40,000 people living in Butte, and by 1920, that number had ballooned to nearly 90,000. The mining town was becoming a city. The mining industry even began facilitating the creation of large pieces of civic infrastructure to support the growing metropolis. In 1899, William Clark purchased 21 acres and invested $1 million of his own dollars to construct the Columbia Gardens amusement park, an oasis of green created with the barren landscape of extraction. And he created this for the enjoyment of the residents of Butte. In 1920, Butte was producing 30% of the nation's copper, equating to $55 million annually, and is also the location of Charlie Chaplin's first performance in the United States. These two realities, occurring simultaneously, evidence a type of labor and leisure that would not be possible without the vast urbanization of the Butte Hill. As mining techniques became more efficient and metal prices dropped, the process of mining became less informative to the city. In the 1950s, Butte converted to open pit mining and transformed this integrated mining community into a community adjacent to a mine. This transformation left almost 100 years of mine waste interspersed throughout the community as the pit began its process of consuming the East Side neighborhoods. In 1983, the EPA designated Silverbow Creek as a Superfund site, making it the largest Superfund in the United States, reaching from Butte 120 miles northwest to Milltown, just east of Missoula. This began the ongoing reclamation efforts to protect human health from the dangers associated with mining that continue to this day. Today, over 660 million metric tons of waste rock are spread across the 25 square mile surface of the Butte Hill. In 1961, Butte became a National Historic Landmark, which was then expanded to the Butte Anaconda Historic District in 2006, becoming the largest historic landmark district in the country, with over 6,000 contributing properties. Some of these properties include landscapes forever altered by mining, as we see here on the right. Today, Butte is a community showcasing its extraction past. Enamored with its storied past, all things in Butte point backward, with very little attention going to imagining how this legacy translates into a novel future for a community that will continue to rely on extraction, both in resources and experience, or tourism, for its well-being. One example of the burdens of the past can be seen in the abandoned Berkeley Pit. This increasing body of acidic water in the former open pit mine has become an attraction for the town, with billboards along the interstate boasting the overlook as a tourist destination between Glacier and Yellowstone National Parks. This attraction offers very little to the community that bears its environmental burden and the pending mechanized cleaning of the water that will run in perpetuity to to prevent contamination of the region's water system. Some of the reclamation efforts have resulted in a new economy through tourism and have created community assets. Here we see the Montana Folk Festival under the head frame of the original mine, which brings in over 150,000 people annually for the event and is anticipated to more than double in the future. This site remains closed to the public, except for special events. However, most of the reclamation sites look like this. Here we see the reclaimed Missoula Gulch. Due to the EPA's findings of practical infeasibility to remove the hazardous materials, a waste left in place strategy was implemented. This has resulted in a landscape that is graded to a maximum slope of 1 to 3 and covered with an 18-inch cap of settled soil and seeded to provide protection of human health. This process has made the Butte Hill uninhabitable in a new way, as the cap has created a fragile prairie segregating many parts of the community once connected by mining. The aim of returning the Butte Hill to its pre-mining condition ignores the opportunity to leverage this post-industrial landscape for a new future. Looking to the past, a time prior to the settlement of Butte, traps the community in an uninhabitable place, for without mining, there would be no community. Here we see the BA&P Hill Trail, a former rail connection between Butte and Anaconda that is now an asphalt trail for walking, jogging, and biking that covers over 26 miles. Because of the historic use adjacent to the rail line in Butte, the trail is flanked on both sides by sloping hillside of primarily low grasses as a result of the remediation phase of the EPA cap approach to protecting people from the dangers of exposed waste rock. Very little thought was given to the use of these cap sites, as the focus was to address immediate and significant human health and environmental risks. This site became the site for a graduate studio in the summer of 2013. Students selected sites along the hill trail to propose alternative reclamation strategies where small interventions could instigate large-scale change. The programs chosen by students included a botanical garden that referenced the loss of the Columbia Gardens and other botanic species along the Clark Fork River, through specific species selection coupled with their relationship of available soil depth and through the site regrading. Another project became a didactic slice into the waste rock of the region to uncover the native soil as a way to educate the public of the recent history and transformation of the region. This project also considered itself part of a larger agenda of the historic district by demonstrating the history of the reclamation work in one location. Similar to the tailings observation area located east of Anaconda, the photo that we saw earlier, along the former rail line where an area of contaminated landscape has been preserved for its historic significance. One project looked at larger connectivity of the region and leveraged stormwater management and sediment control as a way of initiating both new habitat creation and the restoration of historic pedestrian connections. A final project identified community reconnection as a driving force of restoration through gardening and gathering. This work was then exhibited in the county offices in the fall of 2013 and used as a departure point for new conversations regarding reclamation work on the Butte Hill. It also shifted the focus of the planned work for the following summer to more directly address improvements along the hill trail. As a result of this work, a new conversation emerged regarding the 8-acre parcel of the former Bonanza mine. Cleanup operations began in 1987 and were divided into two phases. An initial phase that was an expedited response action to source areas of contamination by removing or capping waste dumps, railroad beds, and other areas related to mine waste. Phase 2 is the final remediation work related to addressing remaining environmental human health issues associated with water and soil. The plan resulted in the Record of Decision being adopted in 2006. In 2008, the Atlantic Richfield Company, now owned by BP, agreed to pay $187 million to finance the cleanup of the Clark Fork River contamination as a result of over a century of mining activity in Butte and Anaconda. The EPA's regional administrator, Robbie Roberts, stated in 2008, the environmental benefits will go directly to local landowners with improved soil and extend to all Montanans through cleaner water and improved fisheries. However, many of these sites require continued maintenance given the harsh conditions and have no economic benefit to the community. Furthermore, many of these sites remove areas for play and recreation, albeit in a landscape of rock containing lead, zinc, and arsenic, among many other heavy materials. During the initial testing phase, the 8-acre site of the former Bonanza was tested in 2 locations. One test was above the legal limit for contaminants, the other below. When averaged, the entire site fell below the minimum level for remediation, and the site was left untouched except for a small area surrounding the mine cap. The site has been used as an illicit BMX course for decades, where community youth have exploited the opportunities of the abandoned site. This site holds some of the values and qualities that Dobbs described, a playground that is owned by the community, unlike most of the former mine sites that are fenced or posted with signs forbidding use, though one that is also exposing youth to the toxicity the EPA is working to cap. Within the record of decision, there was an outline to create the Butte Hill Trail on the abandoned railbed, now the BA&P, open space to both help with stormwater management and to improve the aesthetics of the town, education related to damage to the waste left in place cap protection of mining material, and a series of park and recreational areas for the residents. While this does exceed the basic criteria of human health and environment, it is a passive and rather generic approach to both the physical and social restoration of a place so unique as Butte. Furthermore, none of these strategies actively engage an approach for a healthy and economically viable community. And so the project that we are currently working on, one of these,
The center
one, okay, is right here, which is the former Bonanza. So here we have Iron Street and Excelsior West Elementary. Here we see the Hill Trail. And this 8-acre parcel is currently being used, as I said, as an illicit BMX track, as well as a snow storage facility for Butte Silver Bow. It is also part of what we hope to be a larger strategy of connecting the community, which I'll talk about in a little bit. And so this work began out of another graduate studio of Montana State University architecture students. And there were 5 teams of 2 that were challenged to reconsider how this incredible investment in reclamation could go beyond just protecting human health, but actually could create very specific placemaking for the community of Butte, reclaiming something that had been lost even if it isn't identified within the record of decision, this kind of ownership of a landscape that doesn't exist anywhere else, an ability of play and recreation that didn't exist prior to mining. But also as a way of looking at this kind of investment to go beyond just the basic minimum of protection and have it be an economically viable and actually an economic contributor to the community. And so the students developed a host of different proposals, but one of the common themes that kept coming back was this ability to own the site through BMX and that fascination with the continued movement of dirt and its relationship to a larger network. Currently, the state of Montana has BMX facilities in Bozeman and Great Falls, and when complete, the Bonanza will be the 3rd in the state, improving that access to recreation. And so what we began looking at was then its location here in relationship to a growing neighborhood on the west side of Butte, and also then looking at the potential for it to become the impetus for a larger trail connection through the north and south. Right now we have very good kind of east-west connection, one through the Hill Trail and the other through the trail, currently kind of continuing its extension to the east along the creek. But very little access happens north-south. In fact, if you go out there and at this location right here, you can see where the fence line has been raised as community youth cross the freeway underneath the fence line to access this site. And so one of the proposals very much looked at how could stormwater management and the kind of reclamation of sediment, all those things running down the hill, how could it be beneficial to the placemaking of this site? And also, how could we look at long-term phytoremediation for these toxic materials? So that as we look at a way in which that investment is kind of self-perpetuating, continues to build land, but also that those species regenerate and continue to clean that as a long-term strategy. And that as part of this strategy, this became an economically difficult situation for us to consider going underneath the highway access here. But the idea was that by pulling all of this storm water through the site here, that a trail and a drainage way could allow access to this site and the creation of it as a park, as well as then looking at the drainage way coming down Excelsior as part of that collection and creation of land. So that by using the natural forces and flows of this site, a new topography that was beneficial could be created based on an initial investment with no long-term maintenance required. Ultimately, as I said, what became the most significant kind of program in this discovery was this relationship to BMX and community youth owning the site. And so this model then begins to look at kind of where event travel happens in the region, and also looking at how many riders and what that would take. And so if we follow the model of what the other two tracks in Montana currently have, it's racing 3 days a week, so Tuesday, Thursday night in Bozeman, and Sunday afternoon races. Those races will generate anywhere between 30 and 50 riders 3 times a week, with more regional races generating 50 or 60 participants coming from 2 to 3 hours away, and statewide events which will draw 50% of the over 100 participants from adjoining states. And so what this does is links in to a Butte Silver Bow priority, which is to look at those additional tourism dollars. Can people stop? Will they have dinner? Will they have the kind of hotel stay? Is this a place between the national parks that makes sense to get off the freeway? And looking at this and starting to say that it's not just about attracting tourists. While those dollars are an important part of the community, it's also providing an investment to the community that bolsters a promotion of health. That one of the things that's a specific limitation on the Butte Area 1 grant that we received, which will improve Waterway of Silver Bow Creek, because right now the Bonanza site drains, a lot of its drainage goes into Silver Bow Creek, does not go into the sediment basins or is treated. And so by our strategy of regrading that site, we will prevent that water from leaving the site. We will maintain all that water on site. However, the inclusion of the BMX track, as it was not specifically something damaged by mining, cannot be funded by reclamation dollars. And our premise is that the protection of human health should actually be inverted, and we should look at the promotion of health. That promoting an activity of health, promoting an ownership of a place, goes beyond just the education of saying, don't go out into that field because you can destroy the cap. But by creating an ownership and an understanding of all the systemic conditions that are happening, all the dynamic properties of that site, that promotion of health and that promotion of ownership becomes something significant for the community, and that over time, it allows for a new ownership of the Butte Hill, one that can seek to leverage the opportunities that are unique to this place, that are only possible because of the significant history of mining. And so here we see, and this is still a design that's in flux, and we will be having some community meetings either towards the end of this year or the start of next year, which hopefully you guys will come out to and lend your feedback. But very much what we are seeing is the center of the track as a nationally sanctioned BMX track, which will mean any registered BMX rider in the country can come and earn national points here in these races, which means that it puts Butte as part of a national discussion and is only one of 3 of these tracks in the state of Montana. So it puts the community in a different position and conversation. We also then link an amenity, and what we're looking at is basically a 1/4 mile walking and biking trail around that park, which will allow for people to go, and if not everybody is into riding the BMX track, there will be other amenity there in terms of being able to perimeter that trail. Also looking at the existing creek that we have here, which will be able to show a duality of conditions, in that we'll be looking at the northern portion here being restored to a type of wetland condition, a pre-mining state. And yet, because of the historic significance, we will be leaving the southern portion of that creek as a channelized creek that is channelized with slag brick. So we're able to have a conversation about these two conditions, and because this creek does then go into a continued channelized condition and is coming from a connection of underground piping, there is no point in restoring this to its pre-mining state. Rather, to provide an amenity and educational opportunity for West Elementary, but also as an interpretation of how mining has impacted this place and what maybe potential futures could be. We're also then in discussion about what can happen in this kind of northeast side, and whether that is kind of open green space, whether that is a pump track for younger kids to be able to get introduced to the kind of health of bicycle riding, and as an introduction then to what ultimately might be, whether it's competitive racing or just using the track. One thing to note about this is that races are only 3 nights a week, which means about 95% of the time this investment will be open to the community. So not dissimilar to the skate park that is in town, that the economic generation, if we go back to this chart here, racers will pay $8 for those entry fees. $3 of that covers the liability insurance. So at a national level, everyone is protected if there is an incident on the track. $1 of that will go towards the awards. And the remainder goes back into the rebuilding and the maintenance of that track. So once the initial investment is made, this track self-sustains. There is no additional investment into that track. That the economic model we see here, that after about 2 years, we start to see the potential for reinvestment. The ability to add more equipment, the ability to purchase loaner bicycles for community youth who may not have bicycles or have never been riding before. And so very much looking at how this initial investment can then grow itself and reach out to the larger community. So moving forward, the question of continuing to inhabit such a remote place constructed within a toxic landscape when so few people are directly involved with mining rather than retreating cannot be ignored if we are concerned about health. This residue of mining will forever be present within the community and require a constant management to continue to protect people and the environment. Butte today has a significantly healthier environment with improved air quality, drinking water, and the return of native species, all through the efforts of reclamation. However, these efforts fall short in reclaiming the culture of the community created by mining that has been lost given the shift in priorities and wealth. They also fall short in promoting a new trajectory for Butte, one that promotes health and a new economy that is only possible because of its historic relationship to mining, one that is not burdened by the past. This project proposes a new strategy that leverages the significant investment in remediation to promote healthy recreation as a catalyst for larger change to the ongoing reclamation efforts. It proposes a methodology for reclamation that values the culture of a place that should be integral to the remediation efforts and should be systemically interwoven into a larger plan of social, ecological, and financial resilience. We will continue to see reclamation efforts at a multitude of scales, be they related to extraction or climate change, that will involve long-established communities. Retreating and restoring the place to a previous time ignores the responsibility and the opportunity we have within the creation of the Anthropocene age. Reclamation has the potential to move forward in a way that not previously imagined, while still restoring the ecology of that place for a more mutualistically beneficial future. There is a significant role for the designer in this process. If we can engage in the remaking of the land in creative and productive ways, one can inform places that are specific and address the current and future needs of a community. These investments can promote a holistic health for the community and can become some of the most significant forms of placemaking we can engage in. Thank you.
Have you visited the Big Butte, the Mountain Bike Skills Park
Yes,
campus?
yes,
So you've seen our pump track,
yes.
and then this summer, through both of those were built by from grants with Fish, Wildlife, and Parks.
Right.
And we've connected now the Kennedy School around the front of the M and down to actually the Greenway Trail, which kind of fits in with what you're talking about.
Yes,
But the pump track is what attracts the kids.
right.
There's some younger kids. The big kids, you know, do more things, and there's more, another couple of trails in that skills park.
Right. And that's,
We're doing that, doing what you're talking about already, and you know, in a different way.
right.
Different fun. NRD bought the Big Butte for us. Arco gave the land to Tech, and with a little arm twisting, Tech designated it to a skills park. And then the rest trying to restore the edges of the trails with native plant species is kind of a volunteer effort.
Mhm.
But that's what we're trying to do.
Yes. And that's part of this north-south connection, is seeing that active engagement across the hill.
But one of the problems with, you know, you talk about these other places, they're flat. Getting to the place you're talking about is a hill, any direction you go. And that interferes with, it inhibits bicycle movement in Butte. And now we have bicycle lanes, but you never see anybody on them because they're steep up the hill. So, you know, keep that under consideration. One more thing, I didn't see any parking associated with that track.
And that's why I said this plan was a previous iteration. I can't show you the current plan, but I will tell you there's parking for about 40 people. So our current plan is about 12 permanent parking spaces, and then overflow parking for events. That gets us up to about 40.
That's critical.
Yes. No, this was some of the earlier design student work. We're still in the midst of finalizing what we can show to the public, which is why I'm not.
I mean, it's a beautiful spot. Kids do it anyway.
Right. Right.
You can't stop them.
Right.
They just got home and take them.
Well, yeah, they already have demonstrated that. Yeah.
How do they get there without getting run over on the road?
So, what I was meeting with Butte Silverbow Transportation earlier today, discussing some of those things. Actually, if you look at that area coming down on the west side of Excelsior, there is ample room for sidewalk in that area, as well as we did discuss crossing at that location.
But that's still a freeway entrance right there. So the kids
Cor-
can go across the freeway entrance?
Correct, and that will be part of traffic calming that we'll have to work with MDT on, and we're having those conversations. I can't tell you we have an answer at this point, but it is a conversation we're having. You know, that area is actually designated as 35 mile an hour. Now, that doesn't mean everybody drives 35 miles an hour, but while I was on site there today, 2 joggers and 4 bicyclists passed me going up Excelsior. So it is an active area, as well as the community youth that are going there and biking on that. So to your point, they're already doing it. They're actually crossing an interstate to do that, as that portion of Iron has already become interstate. So we are intending to activate that and make that a safe crossing.
But if you're lucky enough to get that crossing under that on the west side, you know, that's how the kids get in there.
Right.
Now we're eliminating crossing up the freeway.
Right. There are some other.
It's an expensive operation.
Well, there are some other options in terms of, the option to go underneath the on-ramp is not financially viable for us, but to come around, because most of the crossing of Iron Street is actually coming from the south. Those that are coming from the west come above West Elementary and down, just because there's a significant amount of topographic change coming from those near west side neighborhoods. It's actually easier to take the roads around.
So is there a BMX club in town?
We're in the formation of the nonprofit that will then operate the track.
Because the skills part was, any kind of a formal use depends on individuals.
Right.
Like pushing it. I would, when we got the funding, my intention is to have a, of course, part of it is our swimming pool gets shut down forever. To have a triathlon that took the skills park, the Big Butte, and some of the land west. And of course, the swimming pool is not functional yet, but it's still, the bicycle clubs are more interested in the Continental Divide Trail. They all go out there and ride, but.
Right. No, we are in the process of building that organization. So, question here?
I was just curious. You said you were going to try and make like a wetlands component of this.
Mm-hmm.
Are you kind of looking at like catch basin 8 as far as being like the wetlands component of it, or how like?
No, it would be a small area direct on the north end of the site. So, in this area here. So, yes, this does drain into those catch basins, but the idea was to look at the recreation of some of that wetland here on site, not in any means of replacing what those said. There's not enough volume for us to deal with that on this site.
Yeah, I was just curious because I know there's the water there, but there doesn't seem to be any water like above. So I was just curious what you guys were going to do.
Well, there's a culvert here that is where this water comes from, and it flows year round. Yeah. So that water is currently being tested to know what all is in that water, as we're not completely sure of where all the sources of that water are coming from. So
Guaranteed it's contaminated.
the question is, what is it contaminated with, right? It's like, you can look at these kind of photos and tell that there's something there. The question is knowing what it is and in what levels that we have to remediate. Yeah.
That led into my question was, obviously you can't just have kids, the whole point, right, is that they're riding on contamination
Right.
there. So are you gonna have to scrape and fill? And
Yeah, so the grading plan that's being developed right now is to rough grade the site to what we need for all of the functions, and then the cap will be appropriate to what happens above. So in the areas where we are doing turf grass or native vegetation will be the typical kind of EPA cap. In areas where we're putting asphalt down, that will provide for that cap. And then the track specifically will likely be a road mix cap that then we will overfill with the clay-based soil, simply because that portion of the site will continue to be remade, and we need to make sure that there's a notification layer so that if any excavation, any reworking of that track hits a different material, that they know that they have gone too far, but that they haven't penetrated the cap. So that we're still in discussion about what that exact material will be. And one of the things that doesn't quite show up in this plan as well, but also looking, because that'll be a high clay-based material, it is completely impervious. And so we'll shed that water and then look at drainage ways. And as I said, all bioswale and detention or retention on site, so that we are looking at storing all of that water there so none of it leaves the site.
I can't remember where we got the clay for the pump track or the switchback trails. Wherever we got it, it is damn durable.
Good.
It is really durable.
Good. We'll have to talk about your supplier then.
Yeah, I don't know where it was, but there is a vent pipeline.
Yeah. Well, and that's essentially what you're looking for.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
there is one west
Yeah.
of town.
Yeah.
Well, what would happen with the snow if that site would be taken? Do they have another site where they would probably go with snow?
No, we actually part of the parking strategy is to look at the base parking for kind of daily use in the summer, and then the overflow parking for events would be a gravel, a permeable surface, not dissimilar to the kind of current parking out at Skyline, so that they still can do their snow management there. And then some of the discussion today as well was making sure that if in a heavy snow year they do have more than we anticipate, that all of that still can be kind of detained on site, so we're not sending it into the said basins. Yeah.
During the week when there aren't BMX events that people are paying to go to, are the people who would just come down and use it, are they charged admission?
No. It is only for, yeah. It's only for sanctioned races that anyone would pay a fee. As I said, 95% of the time it will be free and open to the public, similar to the skate park. There'll have to be a sign posted with, use at your own risk, wear safety equipment, which is common for these kind of facilities. And part of that is to say that this initial investment then is sustained by the racers and becomes an amenity for the community and for those visiting the community. Yeah.
Yeah, I have two questions. First question is who owns this site right here? It used to be owned by Berry Lane. Did ownership change hands?
It's Butte Silverbow who owns the land. Yeah.
Secondly, she made the comment that you couldn't use restoration dollars for the improvements that you've identified here, for remediation dollars, excuse me, for these improvements here. So when you look at these, where is your source of funding coming from for the completion of the improvements?
So we cannot use the specific remediation or Butte Area 1 funds for BMX. Everything else on the site can be funded under those. However, because BMX was not specifically listed as something injured by mining, the track and track equipment has to be funded elsewhere. So we currently have a few grants that are out there pending funding. It's about $26,000 for the start gate equipment.
I've never heard this, that BMX was never categorically excluded or never listed. It was not listed in any of the Butte Area 1 dollars. But there's other sources of funds out there. You talked about a 2008 settlement, but really the settlement for lost recreational opportunities in the Butte Hill came down in 1999.
Right, and we have not approached any of the reclamation dollars yet.
They paid for the Big Butte, but remember the Big Butte was outside of the area that was under the consent decree. They wouldn't allow any expenditure of restoration dollars on the Butte Hill. Well, then consent decree negotiations were underway because there was unclear about what was going to be paid for under remediation and what was being paid for under restoration.
Right.
We still don't have a consent decree.
Right.
We won't see it in my lifetime.
Well,
So what we've got is we've got a couple of pots of money sitting with the governor right now that could fund this very easily.
and we're still in negotiations. We're looking. We've got some both internal and national grants that are out there, and some additional ones that are coming down the line. So we're looking to see how those pan out before we go approaching some of those other dollars, because we think that some of these items could actually not only be the burden of those dollars associated with Butte, but they could come from national sources that see this as a model. And strategically, we're interested in that because we are looking at this as a case study of how these issues of reclamation can go beyond just the burden of the community themselves, but looking at promoting something much bigger.
Like a brownfield.
Similar to brownfield, yeah. That within these, that the promotion of health and the promotion of these kind of activities that are specifically leveraging a toxic history, that is a model that we will see not just in industrial landscapes, but will certainly be a model that we'll see in climate change as rising sea level, specifically communities along the Northeast that are built what is now above water level will soon be below water level, and the idea of how that kind of reclamation can maintain a community.
If we go underwater, it won't be from sea level rise.
Yeah. I don't think sea level rise is going to impact us here.
Thank you so much. If there are no more questions, appreciate you getting your
Great.
Great.
Thank you all.